Dr. Wessels here. Do you have a few minutes for your sales development? We're talking now about the DealSMARTS selling methodology and closing. How to close. As a skill development objective, it shows up again and again and again. It's often thought that when some deals just seem to drag, it's because we cannot close. When everyone's standing around wondering why nothing's happening, it's easy to point to closing techniques as the gap. And it's obvious because it's a gut-wrenching silence that causes everyone's mind to wander. I mean, just thinking about it is so bad. I'm sure it's the sort of feeling that actors use when they need to cry on camera. How do we ensure that we're closing properly? Well, it's not about tricky questions and techniques. Those can be handy and sometimes they're good. But others rely on compliance techniques, and some of those are not allowed because those ones boil down to lies, tricks, and pressure tactics. If you do a good job in the progression of the sale, you'll find you won't need pressure tactics. And a final point on pressure tactics is that they create distrust, and they're based on distrust. Buyer and seller are not developing a relationship. They're in a game of outwitting each other, and the long term is sacrificed for the immediate win. The bottom line is, if you've discovered and progressed the sales well, closing is not an event. You don't even have to think about closing as a problem because it's probably a pain point discovery problem. What is closing all about and how do we do it? 3 things. First, closing is about momentum. Starting with a big pain point and demonstrating how the product or service will solve it and why it's worth doing now has the power to get the customer to uncap their pen and say, "Where do I sign?" So the action item here is a laser focus on the pain point and the expansion on its consequences that can be solved by the product. Then you walk them through the solution to close with escalating agreement and commitment. That's the second thing. Escalating agreement and an increasing buy-in is how we build momentum, and it ultimately ends in a close. Starting small and gaining agreement is the way to go down that pathway. Escalating agreement can be done behaviorally by collecting little yes responses to a series of if-then questions. And it's really about building a rationale for the customer to make sense of the decision. The same can be said actually for reducing resistance, as in selling things like insurance or things people don't go looking to buy. You're helping them build a rationale, and this time to avoid pain. Selling is about, and closing is about ownership transfer. Progressing the sale is the process of transitioning the customer from window shopper to actual owner. Ownership does not include just title to the stuff. If you've bought discount furniture, you know that title gets you the ability to assemble it as well. That needs to be transferred as well. The action item is to get the customer to show you how the product or service will go and used and valued. Third, closing is about exchanging value. Ownership is exchanged, but to work, closing requires the customer and the company to arrive at a determination of fair value exchange. It can't be lopsided. It has to be equal. And once the customer sees that there's enough value for their money, they'll buy. Negotiation, in turn, is the process of resolving that money for value equation. And there's lessons for you to review on that if you want that. But in summary, closing problems are almost always consequences of earlier problems. We close by building momentum through a focus on implications of the pain point tied to the solution. The action item is gaining escalating agreement. We proceed to transferring ownership of the product or service by getting the customer to describe what they need to do to realize the value that they are buying. Yes, then we negotiate, and we ensure that there is perceived equality in the exchange of money and value. Closing well happens early. Now, the only thing we don't have more of is time, so sell well.